Cardano has always been much maligned for being an outsider, for being an outcast, for being an outlier, for not being a part of the EVM world, not even account balance. But I think we're entering a new era when people will really start appreciating Cardano's status outside of the unknowing mainstream herd. It's true. The budget cruise ship is much larger than a life raft, but when the cruise ship starts sinking, everyone would rather be on the life raft. If you feel like you would definitely be the one to remember to bring the whiskey on the life raft, or if you're finding value in these videos, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. I hope everybody had a fantastic weekend. But before we move on to our Cardano news and Cardano thoughts, I have to address one thing. Last time I mentioned that I had been drinking Cava instead of alcohol. I think, and I still think, I'm still drinking Cava instead of alcohol. And I think the people of the South Pacific may have come up with a better solution than basically the rest of the world. So globally, I think everybody wants to have a drink on the weekend. So not everybody, but a lot of humankind wants to have a drink on the weekend if they can. In a lot of the world, that boiled down to taking starches, and converting them, basically into sugars, and then fermenting the sugars, and then maybe distilling, what comes out of the fermentation. But in the South, and that works great. Like, don't get me wrong here. If somebody puts a Bruichladdich Octomore or a Bruichladdich Black Art in front of me, I'm gonna drink them. Like, if you put those in front of me, I'm gonna be drinking those. But there's a price to be paid. Whiskey, wine, beer, these are wonderful human inventions. I will I will say that very directly. Wonderful human inventions. However, as you get older, there was a price to be paid the next day. It's not such a big price when you're like 22. If you're 22, enjoy. As you get older, like I am, the price becomes too damn high. The price is too high. The next day, the hangovers are too high. With Cava, no hangover. I'm going to continue enjoying Cava until I find that there is some equal downside, but so far the downside of Cava seems to be tremendously lower than the suffering you experience the next day when you after drinking. Even as you get older, even a little bit seems to disrupt REM sleep. I think for me that's the biggest problem. The biggest culprit is the lack of REM sleep. You definitely seem to feel it a lot the next day. So anyways, Cava seems to be good. But I think we're now in such a deep part of the crypto winter, the crypto bear cycle, the crypto bear market, that we're starting to see all of the karmic retribution from the bull cycle days. All of the upside of the bull cycle is now being revisited on each crypto community that embraced it a little too strongly, that became a little too exuberant during the bull cycle days. And here's a great example of this. So this news started popping up last week. People started commenting on this. So basically what's being reported is that there's an expectation that FTX will receive approval to liquidate a bunch of its assets. And then obviously those assets will be sold on the open market or some market, maybe not even the open market, but they're going to sell it wherever they can get the highest price. And they're going to use that money to try to satisfy part of the outstanding liabilities that are owed to the creditors. And we're not going to talk about the priority of the various different types of creditors and all those kind of things, but this is the sort of administrative, resolution of this giant entity that will probably go down as one of the most notorious entities in the history of crypto. It had certain assets. And lo and behold, just like normal, the last asset they were going to have, the last big asset they were going to add was going to be Cardano. But we never made the list. We were never in the cool kids club, at least according to Sam Bankman-Fried and company, apparently because he hadn't yet added us. And yes, I know there's lots of stories that we were just about to be added, but the important thing is we weren't added. We're not on the list. So there's not some gigantic portion of $1 billion worth of our cryptocurrency from our crypto community that's going to be auctioned off or sold off, however they decide to dispose of it in these liquidation events. Look what we have. And the different crypto communities are all quibbling. Like I know the Sol people are all saying that some portion of the Sol is like locked up, so it's not really this dollar amount. I don't think it matters. If you're talking about hundreds of millions, if you're talking about something that starts looking like a majority of $1 billion worth of your cryptocurrency, it's a pretty significant event. I mean, even in the tens of millions for some of these smaller crypto ecosystems, this could be a pretty significant event. But this is just one of those cases where it paid for us not to be in the cool kids club. And I think we're going to see more and more of this. It feels like we're already so deep in crypto winter. Like it can't, like the snow's not going to get any deeper. And yet it keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper. We keep getting into the darker and darker regions of crypto winter. And as we do, I think more and more things like this will be happening. And every time something like this does happen, it's kind of like the robbery forest thing. Every time there's a huge robbery forest event, I'm so glad we're not a part of the EVM world or the account balance world. And I think with a lot of these types of events, it's always been the same thing. I'm like relieved we were less connected to the rest of the crypto world, that we had fewer bridges, that it was more inconvenient, that there was a greater stigma attached to us, and somehow we weren't included. In all these events, I find myself more and more happy. And I know most people in Cardano are always hoping for more and more connectedness, but there are positives to greater connectivity and more cross-chain stuff going on. But in a lot of these cases, what we're finding is that we were better off not to be a part of the cool kids club. Meanwhile, over here in Cardano, things just keep getting better and better. One of the most unusual things about Cardano has always been that Cardano smart contracts were Plutus smart contracts, and Plutus was basically Haskell. And Haskell, being a functional programming language, did not have that many developers who could program anything in it. Let's just put it that way. There are not that many Haskell programmers in the world. We've talked about it a billion times. Now we're finally getting to that part of the Cardano story where we have more and more imperative programming available within Cardano. Much easier languages that are much more accessible to many more developers are now available in the Cardano ecosystem. One of them is Icon, and people are seeing fantastic results. Here's Sunday Labs saying, it goes without saying that we're excited about Icon on Cardano ADA. How excited? How about 25 orders per transaction? And they have this video, which is going to show you the Sunday Swap launch versus the Sunday Swap launch with Icon contracts. So when you watch this, you'll see a couple numbers. One is unfilled orders. That's over here on the left. And then in the center of the screen, you'll see filled orders. And watch the way this looks. So check this out. Right now, we're at unfilled orders for 500. Up here on the regular launch, we were at 1,000. Right now, under Icon, filled orders 1,200. Up here, we're at 116 in the regular launch. So you can already see how this is going. Under Icon, we're seeing many, many more filled orders and many fewer unfilled orders. Like, for instance, right now, we're at about 2,000, and up here on top, we're at 4,000 for unfilled orders. So about half as many under Icon. And then with filled orders, right now, we're at about 4,500, and up on top here, we're at 300. So pretty tremendous difference. This is sort of, to me, just we're like in the opening innings of the game of Cardano evolution. This is sort of just the beginning of the Cardano story. I think Charles and IOHK and the architects behind the Cardano system, I think deep down they always kind of knew it would look something like this. I think when they chose Haskell, deep down they knew that there was going to be some chance that we would see, there's going to be some chance that we would see a slow start to Cardano development because of the choice of functional programming. But once you got over that hump, things were going to be very stable. We're going to have this fantastically strong foundation. And then you could do all the imperative programming stuff like Icon based on that foundation. You could also listen to a little Post Malone and have some birria tacos, according to YouTube's proposed selections for us. What is it about large, important international organizations and crypto being in the same title that makes me worried whenever I see the name of any international organization of any import and the word crypto in the title? I get nervous. It should be exciting. I should be thinking to myself, like, oh, maybe they're globally adopting Cardano as the fiat, non-fiat currency of the entire world. Wouldn't that be wonderful? That's not what I think. Whenever I see this, I think to myself, what kind of AML, KYC, anti-narco trafficking, anti-human trafficking, anti-whatever nonsense are they going to use to try to clamp down on crypto? So when I saw this headline, breaking G20 leaders make massive crypto decision that could change everything, I don't think to myself, oh, it's so exciting. They're going to adopt crypto instead of fiat currencies. The days of central banks inflating away all of our savings is over. That's not what I think. I think, uh-oh, what are they doing? So here we find out. So if you don't know, G20, the biggest economies in the world, they all get together and talk. And here is what they said. They have a keen interest in crypto, and that keen interest is in adopting this thing they're calling CARF. So CARF, of course, does not sound good. And that's probably for good reason. It's because CARF actually means Crypto Asset Reporting Framework. So whenever they describe something as a reporting framework, what that's going to mean is that they're going to collect data on transactions and they're going to share it with each other so that they can track certain things. And this is always under sort of the auspices of the people who are trying to stop all the bad things in the world, all the rogue nation states and terrorism funding and narco money laundering, all those kind of things. But it always involves collecting data and then sharing that data between countries. This is exactly the kind of thing that leads to anonymous crypto becoming extinct. Luckily, the biggest economies in the world aren't super good at working together. They're not great at working together. Some of them don't like each other. Some of them don't want to cooperate with each other. They're kind of forced to, on kind of a diplomatic basis in these organizations like the G20. And, there's always a lot of talk and a lot of hand-holding, literally hand-holding in this case. And then not a lot comes out of it. Sometimes, they're able to, accomplish certain very necessary things, but they never quite accomplish everything the rhetoric indicated, which in this case, I think is good for crypto. I mean, there's going to be some international crypto data sharing, and there's going to be an international regulatory framework for crypto, and they're going to do all that AML, KYC stuff that they do in fiat on crypto for sure. The good thing is they're not good at working together, so it takes a long time for them to accomplish anything that really ends up having any relevance. They're very bureaucratic, very slow. Here's more evidence that some crypto people might be on a sinking budget cruise ship. Okay, maybe not. There's only a couple possibilities here. So the news that came out was that someone paid over $500,000 in Bitcoin for a transaction fee. So they did a single transaction and somehow they ended up paying over $500,000 in Bitcoin as a transaction fee. So it looks like the transaction fee was 19.82 Bitcoin. So there's a couple of possibilities here. Either there was some kind of mistake, which is, the initial reaction most people had. This person is like laughing with tears about the future of finance, and certainly the very slow development of Bitcoin and the, by some people's estimation, very basic and unsatisfactory user experience in Bitcoin, is something that people have criticized in the past. The other possibility here is that this was some kind of illicit activity, like maybe some kind of money laundering. They, basically paid a bunch of money to a miner to cover up the source of these funds. The miner can claim that somebody basically like fat fingered the transaction fee on this, and voila, the money is now clean regardless of where it might have come from. So a lot of speculation around that stuff. Who knows what this is, but either way it's bad. Either way it makes crypto look bad. If people are making $500,000 mistakes in Bitcoin transactions, it makes us look bad. It makes it look like it's an unusable technology, unusable, very dangerous, very risky technology. If if this is the product of some kind of, illicit or fraudulent activity of some type, also very bad, also makes us look bad. But either way, I mean, this kind of just shows how young the crypto space is. The reason why this is more dangerous than it just being an indicator of us being very young is that these are the kinds of events that are going to be used to fuel the move from public, anonymous crypto ecosystems to tightly controlled, Wall Street driven, private, basically KYC'd chains. I think no matter what we do, a lot of the financial activity that could happen on public anonymous blockchains is going to move to those private blockchains, because the regulators are going to put in place regulations that can basically only be satisfied by those types of entities. That's sort of been my thesis for the last couple of years, that no matter what we did, eventually some big portion of the crypto scene was going to be captured by the legacy TradFi institutions. And the mechanism for that happening was going to be regulatory burden that could only be satisfied by the TradFi incumbents. I mean, it's like you take a crypto team, they might have enough developers to create the platform or create the ecosystem, create the tool, but they don't have enough people, the know-how, or the personnel power to satisfy the compliance requirements. I'm obviously not the only one who's been saying and thinking this for a long time. Here's a post from Gabe Shapiro. To be honest, as a lawyer in the space, I'm close to capitulating. He's not really going to capitulate, but no one is going to be able to afford the work required to comply with this except centralized exchanges and a few blue chip DeFi projects. Even for them, there is not enough time. And he's talking about some new consumer protection standards being implemented. I think they're being introduced, whatever introduced means, but eventually to be implemented, I'm sure, by the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK. So I think this is the way the legacy institutions take control of at least a big chunk of crypto, maybe, and definitely a much bigger chunk than we're going to be comfortable with. How big it is, what percentage, I don't know, but it's going to be a gigantic chunk that's going to go to the legacy TradFi institutions. The way they're going to do it is through being able to comply with onerous, burdensome regulatory compliance that normal crypto projects just don't have the money, means, or know-how to comply with. Speaking of tweets from the very impressive Mr. Shapiro, here's another one that sadly is probably true. He says, if you run any kind of interface, etc., so any kind of platform, any kind of front end, any kind of interface for a DeFi credit protocol, block the US. That is some unwelcome advice for everybody in DeFi, because, well, almost everybody in DeFi, because almost everybody is using these platforms that involve some kind of credit, some kind. And the problem with credit is that credit can allow you to do a lot of the things that the CFTC says is under its jurisdiction. And basically, none of these DeFi platforms doing these types of things are registered in any way with the CFTC. So he says, many people told me I was crazy when I said that the CFTC's case against UkiDAO simply makes DeFi illegal under the CFTC's view of US law. I was right. They were wrong. So you'll remember we talked about the UkiDAO ruling, the UkiDAO case on this channel. What happened in UkiDAO is the CFTC wanted to go after a DAO, and there was a question: what is a DAO? Can you go after a DAO? Can you go after it just like it's an LLC or a corporation or something like that, or is it something else that you can't go after? What is it exactly? And the court basically said, hey, it looks like this DAO is just some kind of unincorporated association of people, which in certain states might open up the door for joint and several liability of the members. And they went through the whole thing. How do you even serve this DAO? The government had tried to serve the DAO through the through a posting in the DAO forum, and there was this question: can you even serve it? And eventually, that question was resolved. Yes, you can serve the DAO, and it opened up this whole Pandora's box of issues for the members of DAOs. In some states, it might be treated differently, but in some states, if it's just an unincorporated association of people, then you might be opening the door to joint and several liability for every single member of the DAO. So here we have the CFTC continuing to go after DeFi platforms, whether or not they're run by DAOs. Here's the actual CFTC press release on those settlements. They're with Opine, 0x, and DarrettX. I'm not even familiar with these platforms, so I may pronounce their names wrong, but it's these corporations which are kind of the lab entities behind the DeFi platforms. But if we go back to the UkiDAO example, we can think about something that should be a lot scarier that I think people really don't understand. So what we have here is the CFTC has decided it can go after your DeFi platform if you're doing credit stuff, because credit stuff can, in the words of this this press release, allow the CFTC to charge the entities, whether they're DAOs or lab entities like these companies behind the platform, charge those entities with illegally offering leveraged and margined retail commodity transactions in digital assets. So the problem with platforms that do credit stuff is that people use it to accomplish transactions that include leverage and margin, which falls under the CFTC wheelhouse. So think about this problem though that's created by these things together. So CFTC is going to go after these platforms that in DeFi that do these things, and nobody's really debating whether or not leverage and margin fall under the CFTC. A lot of people think that a DAO is like a shield and that the regulators can't go after the DAO, or like the DAO can't be sued. But the UkiDAO case basically tells us that those DAOs are a legal person that can be served and sued. And scarier is that court decided that UkiDAO was an unincorporated association, which is okay in some states like California, because in California, they say that an unincorporated association, starts looking a little bit more like an actual, organized business entity, where the entity itself, the association, can sort of take on debts that aren't necessarily imputed to the members in the same way they would be in some other states. And in some other states, they say there is no such thing as an unincorporated association. You guys are just in a general partnership. The problem with the general partnership in a lot of states is that we are going to have joint and several liability. That means any of the judgments against that DAO which they're going to call a general partnership, any of the judgments against the DAO or any of the debts of the DAO can become the debts of you as an individual member of the DAO. This is a huge problem. These settlements are small. These are 250,000, 200,000, and 100,000. So they're six-figure settlements. They're pretty small though in crypto. These aren't, the kinds of gigantic settlements we, tend to grab the big headlines in crypto. But this is just the beginning. They're just kind of testing the waters here. We could see some gigantic settlements of some gigantic DAOs, and because of the precedent, in that UkiDAO case, granted that won't have precedential authority for other courts necessarily. That's just one court, but because of the sort of type of thinking in that case, if other courts adopt that, this could be a serious problem for members of DAOs. This is kind of a huge problem for DAOs currently. I believe in DAOs as something that could replace a lot of different types of human organizations, maybe even including corporations. I wouldn't be at all surprised if one day everybody's working for a DAO and there are no corporations. Corporations seem in 2023 to be a pretty inefficient way to organize human economic activity. I do believe that DAOs could be a very viable replacement for corporations in many ways that I've laid out on this channel, maybe much, much better for the people working for these types of entities. However, right now we've got this big problem with liability of DAO members for judgments against or debts of the DAO since this UkiDAO case, and that hasn't been resolved yet. So there's this problem with DAOs that I think a lot of people in crypto don't really know about. Finally, we couldn't finish this video without commenting on what has to be the most interesting news from last week, at least in the Cardano ecosystem, but very exciting and interesting news. So this was a response that Charles made to a post by Stake with Pride. And thank you, Stake with Pride, for eliciting this response. This is very interesting. So this is all about the Wyoming RFP. For those of you who don't know what an RFP is, this is like a tender process, you would call it in some places. So the government is saying, hey, we've got this project, we want to do this thing. Why doesn't everybody bid? Everybody who wants to do this thing for us, why don't you bid? It's like it's a tender basically, but they're calling it an RFP, right? So this RFP is about the Wyoming stablecoin that we've talked about for a long, long time. We've followed a lot of different news about the slow development of this Wyoming stablecoin. I think it's a fantastic idea by the people in Wyoming who are pushing crypto forward in that state. It's very safe to say that Wyoming is the most crypto forward state in all of the United States. And Charles Hoskinson has not been ignoring this. Charles, for a long, long time, you'll remember that the Cardano Summit just a couple of years ago was held in Laramie, Wyoming, at the University of Wyoming. And Charles owns a ranch in Wyoming. His father and I believe his brothers in Wyoming. He has his bison ranch in Wyoming. He has his longevity medicine clinic in Wyoming. He's developing the Nessie's restaurant in Wyoming. Charles is very, very involved in Wyoming just generally, and he's also very involved with the development of the stablecoin. Here he responds, I'm on the subcommittee and literally driving up tomorrow to be at the commission meeting alongside several others. It's an open RFP process and we'll obviously bid. And then he starts commenting on some news on another YouTube channel where they sounds like I haven't listened to this. I haven't watched this video, but it sounds like they're trying to claim that, Cardano won't get it. Who knows who will end up getting this stablecoin? But definitely, if anybody has put in the groundwork in Wyoming, it's Cardano. In Wyoming, you've got some big centralized exchanges like Kraken, who've put in a lot of groundwork in Wyoming. You've got Custodia, Caitlin Long's crypto bank, Custodia, that's put in a lot of groundwork in Wyoming. And then you've got Cardano. It's hard to say that any crypto ecosystem other than Cardano, has put in more groundwork in Wyoming, has deeper roots in Wyoming. So Charles has put in a lot of work and he's on the subcommittee. So keep your fingers crossed for this. I think this is honestly probably some of the most exciting news in Cardano right now. We're always, of course, interested in all the infrastructure development, new smart contract programming languages, new platforms, new projects in Cardano. That's really exciting news. But something like this could end up being the biggest thing to happen in Cardano, in the next year. If we won this RFP, we're talking about IOG here. Obviously, it's IOG who would be bidding on this project. If IOG won this RFP and the Wyoming stablecoin was built on Cardano, and it turned out to be a very widely used stablecoin, a very sought after, good stablecoin that a lot of people wanted to use, this could be a fantastic thing for Cardano. Obviously, this is news we'll follow. I hope you're starting out a great week, and I'll talk to you soon.